Money as government, evolutionary selection through reputation systems. Government is typically defined in institutional terms, a centralized authority with a monopoly on rulemaking, enforcement, and resource allocation within a territory. This definition is descriptively convenient but analytically shallow. It obscures the underlying functional role of government, which is not its institutional form, but its economic function. At its core, government is the system that allocates decision-making power over scarce resources and enforces the outcomes of those allocations. This includes determining who controls capital, how disputes are resolved, and how collective trade-offs are adjudicated under conditions of scarcity and uncertainty. Once defined this way, it becomes clear that government is not fundamentally about coercive institutions or legal texts. It is about control over allocation. Money already performs this function. In any monetary economy, the distribution of money determines the distribution of control over resources. Individuals and organizations with greater purchasing power exert greater influence over what is produced, how resources are allocated, and which projects are sustained or terminated. Every transaction is a micro-decision about resource allocation, and the aggregate of these decisions constitutes the economic structure of society. From this perspective, money is not merely a medium of exchange or a store of value. It is a decentralized governance mechanism. It continuously reallocates decision-making authority in response to signals of productivity, profitability, and expectation. Prices function as coordination signals, but money determines who gets to act on those signals. In this sense, money is government. However, current monetary systems are structurally constrained. They rely on incomplete information, allow for significant suppression of relevant data, and often decouple purchasing power from actual productivity due to institutional distortions, including privacy barriers, regulatory asymmetries, and legacy allocation mechanisms. As a result, the government embedded in money is noisy, lagged, and often systematically misaligned with total productivity. A reputation-based monetary system resolves these constraints by redefining the unit of account. Instead of money representing an accumulation of exchange history filtered through opaque systems, it represents a quantified measure of verified productivity. Reputation becomes the currency, and currency becomes the direct encoding of evolutionary contribution. This transformation has a critical implication. It allows governance itself to become competitive. In traditional systems, there is a single dominant governance structure within a given territory. Even in systems with formal political competition, the underlying monetary and legal infrastructure is unified, limiting the scope of true systemic variation. Evolutionary selection requires variation, differential performance, and retention of successful traits. A monopolized governance structure suppresses variation, and therefore suppresses evolutionary optimization. A reputation system removes this constraint by separating the informational layer from the interpretive layer. The informational layer consists of raw, public, time-stamped data about actions and outcomes. On top of this layer, multiple competing scoring systems can emerge, each attempting to measure productivity according to its own model. Each scoring system is, in effect, a government. It defines how actions are evaluated, how decision-making power is distributed, and how resources should be allocated based on past performance. Suppliers, investors, and participants can choose which scoring system to use when pricing goods, allocating capital, or making strategic decisions. This creates a competitive environment not just for firms and individuals, but for governance frameworks themselves. The selection mechanism is straightforward. A scoring system that more accurately measures and rewards true productivity will allocate decision-making power more efficiently. This leads to higher total output, better coordination, and more successful long-term outcomes. Participants using that system will, on average, outperform those using less accurate systems. As a result, the more effective scoring system gains adoption, while less effective ones lose relevance. This is evolutionary selection applied to governance. Importantly, this process does not require centralized authority or explicit political processes. It emerges from the interaction between performance measurement and resource allocation. Governance becomes endogenous to the economic system rather than imposed from outside it. The result is not a single optimized government, but a dynamic ecosystem of competing governance models. These models are continuously tested against reality through their ability to allocate resources productively. Over time, the system converges toward increasingly accurate representations of value and increasingly efficient distributions of decision-making power. This also resolves a long-standing problem in political economy, the inability to objectively compare governance systems. Traditional comparisons rely on aggregate statistics, ideological arguments, or historical contingencies, none of which provide a clean, real-time feedback mechanism. In a reputation-based system, governance models are directly comparable through their outcomes. Their success or failure is encoded in the distribution of reputation itself. Crucially, this framework does not assume perfect information or perfect rationality. It operates under uncertainty and allows for error. Poorly designed scoring systems can emerge and even temporarily dominate. However, because decision-making power is continuously reallocated based on measured outcomes, systematic inefficiencies are penalized over time. The system is self-correcting in the same way that competitive markets are self-correcting, but at the level of governance rather than just production. In this sense, a reputation system does not eliminate government. It generalizes it. It transforms government from a static, monopolized institution into a competitive, adaptive process. It embeds governance directly into the fabric of economic interaction and subjects it to the same evolutionary pressures that drive innovation and efficiency in other domains. Money, when properly defined as a measure of productivity, becomes the medium through which this process operates. Is no longer just a tool for exchange. Is the mechanism by which society decides who gets to decide. And when multiple such mechanisms are allowed to compete, evolution selects the best government.